A waiter ignored a poor customer. Then he found out who she was. Ryan pressed the creases of his crisp white shirt one final time, then stepped into the bustling dining room of Cordelia's Garden, the upscale restaurant where he worked as a waiter. The lunchtime rush had hit its peak. Sunlight cascaded in from tall windows, glinting off polished wine glasses and silverware, while the soft hum of a piano track played through hidden speakers. Every table was taken, business lunches, celebratory gatherings, couples who savored their midday treat. Ryan inhaled, centered himself, and let the familiar blend of roasted garlic, fresh thyme, and sautéed onions wash over him. He'd worked here for nearly a year, and though only in his mid-20s, he prided himself on a level of composure and refinement that impressed his managers. He intended to open his own restaurant someday, maybe not as grand as Cordelia's Garden, but something with class. First, though, he had to perfect the art of fine service, and he believed he was on track to do just that. To outsiders, Ryan's life looked decent. He wore tailored uniforms, maintained impeccable grooming, and spoke in measured tones that put customers at ease. Yet beneath the surface, he fought the strain of rent due in a pricey city, side hustles that rarely panned out, and a sense that he was constantly chasing respect in a place where money and status ruled. Cordelia's Garden catered to an elite clientele. Wealthy attorneys from the nearby courthouse district, real estate moguls sealing deals, local politicians forging alliances over expensive seafood risotto. They tended to tip, well if you please them, but they could also be exacting, dismissive, or condescending. Ryan believed in reciprocating the energy they brought, polite, professional, but with a firm line if someone became overly entitled. He had encountered plenty of rude customers, snapping fingers, whistling to get his attention, or complaining about trivial details. Over time, he learned to keep a tight smile, respond with courtesy, and move on. But the work demanded vigilance. A single slip could lead to a complaint that might cost him a shift, or worse. That Thursday midday, Ryan circulated the tables, delivering meals, refilling glasses, occasionally providing an over-the-shoulder flambe demonstration for the expensive dessert special. He reveled in the orchestrated dance of it all, hostesses guiding patrons, bartenders shaking cocktails, chefs plating immaculate dishes, waiters weaving between tables. Each role is essential, each person focused. He was deep in that flow when, from the corner of his eye, he spotted someone slipping in the front door. She entered hesitantly, shoulders hunched, wearing an outdated, loose sweater stained with coffee or chocolate. Her hair looked unkempt, pulled back into a ragged ponytail, and she clutched a small threadbare purse. The manager, Edmund, who stood by the host's station, eyed her with mild suspicion. Cordelia's Garden didn't usually see patrons dressed so casually. She gazed around with an air of uncertainty, as though the tall ceilings and gilded frames intimidated her. There was something in her posture that suggested she was new to an environment like this. She stepped toward the hostess stand and mumbled a question. The hostess, trying to keep a polite facade, spoke quietly in return. Then the hostess led her to the dining area, scanning the seating chart for a spot. Ryan's immediate reaction was slight irritation. The woman looked very out of place. He had an instinct. She might order the cheapest dish, linger, and tip poorly. Ordinarily, that was no crime. Everyone deserved a meal. But in a place like Cordelia's, some servers disliked tables that wouldn't yield decent gratuities. Ryan occasionally shared that sentiment. They had a complicated rotation system, and if you got stuck with a low-end table, you could lose potential earnings from a high spender who might have taken that seat instead. He wondered if the hostess would direct this patron to a quiet corner. Indeed, she pointed the woman to a small table near the wall, partially obscured by a pillar. The woman nodded and took her seat. From across the room, Ryan caught sight of her timidly placing the purse on her lap. At that moment, Table 9 signaled Ryan. A well-heeled couple needed more wine. He hurried over, poured a top-up, and politely asked if they needed anything else. The man requested another bread basket. Ryan hurried off to retrieve it, dispatching mental notes about the next tasks. Serve Table 5's entrees, check if Table 7 wanted dessert, and yes, there was that new arrival. Typically, staff alternated tables in a rotation to ensure fairness. By the map, the new arrival in the sweater fell under Ryan's zone. He mentally sighed. If she turned out to be a difficult or minuscule tipper, that could cost him an hour's worth of better tips from another table. Still, a pang of conscience tugged at him. He reminded himself that courtesy was a core tenet here. He'd approach her in a moment. But first, Table 5's entrees were about to come out, and the last thing he wanted was cold salmon fillets sitting under the pass. He delivered the plates with a flourish, ensuring sauce drizzles remained intact. The customers thanked him, praising the aroma. He assured them he'd check back soon. Meanwhile, Table 7 had requested the dessert menu. Another table needed their bill. By the time he cleared those tasks, nearly 10 minutes had slipped by. The new arrival was still sitting, not a glass of water in sight, flipping through the menu uncertainty. Finally, Ryan approached, summoning a polished smile. "Good afternoon. Welcome to Cordelia's Garden. My name is Ryan. I'll be your server. May I start you off with something to drink?" The woman looked up shyly. She had gentle features, maybe in her early 40s, though tired lines creased her forehead. Her eyes flicked away from him. "Ah, just water is fine, thank you," she said quietly. Ryan nodded, expecting that. "Of course," he replied. "Do you have any questions about the menu?" She shook her head quickly, as if intimidated. "Not yet. I'll look a bit more if that's okay." He offered a slight bow. "Certainly. Take your time." He pivoted away, returning moments later with a glass of water. Another table signaled him, complaining that their steak was overcooked. Ryan rushed to rectify it, apologizing, whisking the plate back to the kitchen. The chef scowled, insisting it was cooked medium. Ryan, ever the diplomat, quietly asked for a replacement. Next, a large party of 6 arrived, requiring place settings and menus. That demanded his attention. In the swirl, he all but forgot about the woman in the worn sweater, only occasionally glancing her way. She sat, eyes on the menu, occasionally biting her lip, as though uncertain if she should remain or leave. When Ryan finally returned, maybe 15 minutes later, he forced an apologetic smile. "So sorry for the delay. Ready to order?" She nodded, voice barely above a whisper. I'll just have the soup of the day. And maybe some bread, if that's all right." Ryan inwardly cringed. Soup and bread. This was likely a minimal ticket. But outwardly, he remained professional. "Absolutely," he said. "Today's soup is roasted tomato basil. Would you like to add a side or perhaps a beverage?" She shook her head. "No, just water and soup." Her posture was tense, as if bracing for judgment. "Sure," he repeated, trying not to let his mild frustration show. He left to place the order. Time ticked on. The lunch rush was nearing its peak, tables flipping. Meanwhile, the woman sipped water, eyes drifting around. Ryan noticed she wore shoes scuffed at the soles, and her sweater had a patch on the elbow that suggested repeated repairs. She had the air of someone carrying secret burdens. Yet, in the intensity of service, Ryan's empathy only went so far. He was more concerned about finishing out the shift with strong tips. Table 9 wanted a flambe demonstration. Table 5 soup had spilled, requiring a fresh start. Another hour soared by. Only then did he recall the woman's presence again and realized she hadn't touched any soup. Confusion flickered in him. Had the kitchen forgotten it? He hurried to check. The line cook pointed to a bowl under the heating lamp, waiting. Ryan cursed under his breath, realizing he'd missed calling the expo to deliver it earlier. The soup had been ready for at least 20 minutes. It probably wasn't steaming hot anymore. Frustrated at himself, he grabbed the bowl, frowning. He'd serve it anyway. At her table, the woman was quietly looking at her hands, which seemed reddened from cold or anxiety. Ryan placed the soup in front of her with a rushed, "Here we are, sorry for the wait." She nodded faintly, murmuring a soft thanks. He noticed her shoulders slump as she picked up the spoon. The soup surface had developed a slight skin from sitting. He cringed. Possibly not the best impression. "Is there anything else you need?" he asked, but she just shook her head politely. Ryan left. Another part of him argued he should offer fresh soup, but the lunch chaos beckoned. He told himself, she only ordered the soup. Let's keep focusing on bigger tables. A few minutes later, Table 5 signaled for the check. Table 9 wanted after-dinner coffee. The big group of 6 was finishing up. Ryan was juggling so many tasks, he hardly noticed the woman had taken only a few bites of soup. Eventually, maybe half an hour after first receiving it, she signaled him quietly, raising her hand with reluctance. Ryan approached, noticing she'd barely eaten more than a spoonful. "Is everything okay, ma'am?" he asked. She forced a tiny smile. "I'm sure it's delicious, but it's a bit cold. Could I get a fresh one if possible?" Ryan hesitated. The lunch rush was still heavy, the cook swamped. He'd have to request a new bowl, risk more tension with the line. But he knew ignoring a direct request would be unprofessional. "Certainly," he said, though a hint of impatience seeped into his tone. "I'll have them heat a fresh bowl right away." She nodded, eyes downcast, as though sensing his annoyance. He whisked the bowl away, stepping into the kitchen. The line cook barked at him for refires. Ryan quietly insisted. "She says it's cold, probably from sitting." The cook scowled, but ladled fresh tomato basil into a bowl, garnishing it with a basil leaf. Ryan took it out quickly, setting it before the woman with forced cheer. "Here you are, much fresher. Sorry about that earlier." She nodded, but he sensed tension. She uttered a soft thank you and resumed sipping. Then, for a while, he left her alone. When the lunch crowd thinned, Ryan finally found a lull to approach. "How is it now?" She had finished maybe half. She looked up with an apologetic expression. "It's fine, thank you." He noticed her eyes looked misty, though she tried to hide it. Something about her face pricked at his memory, though he couldn't place it. She rummaged in her purse for a moment, pulling out a small coin pouch. Anxiety flickered across her features as she counted out coins. Ryan realized she might be paying in loose change, not uncommon for some guests, but always a bit awkward. He pretended not to watch. Eventually, she sighed, shoulders sagging. She caught his gaze. "Actually, could I have the bill now?" He nodded, of course. He generated it from the handheld device, presenting it. The cost was minimal, just soup plus tax. She studied the numbers, lips quivering. Then she tried to discreetly fish out coins and a few rumpled bills. She placed them on the table with trembling hands, as if uncertain she had enough. Ryan's stomach twisted. Part of him felt sympathy. Another part was annoyed. Didn't she check prices before ordering? The soup wasn't cheap at a place like Cordelia's, but it wasn't exorbitant either. She was about $1 short, he realized. A flush of embarrassment colored her cheeks. I'm sorry," she whispered, rummaging more. She uncovered an extra coin from her sweater pocket. "Is this enough?" Ryan counted quickly. She was still short by maybe 25 cents. He sighed internally. This was a headache. "You're just a little off," he said quietly. Her face paled. "Oh, I can run to an ATM if you'd let me. Or maybe I can just leave something as collateral? I'm sorry." She looked on the verge of tears. Ryan's frustration spiked. He had other tasks, but now he had to handle a partial payment fiasco. "Hold on, let me see if I can ask the manager," he muttered. The woman seemed mortified. Would it be too much trouble if I just owe you? I can come back tomorrow with it." She must have read the doubt on his face because she lowered her gaze. "I promise I'm not trying to cheat you. I just miscalculated, it's been a tough week." Her words trembled. Ryan hesitated. The difference was trivial, a mere quarter. He considered just paying it himself. But he was also aware of a principle. Employees weren't supposed to cover short payments, as it could encourage dishonest customers. Yet the woman's desperation looked genuine. In the end, he told himself, "It's just a quarter, I'll handle it." He pulled out some coins from his apron pocket. "Don't worry about it," he said, his tone a bit brusque. "I'll cover the difference." Her eyes widened. "Oh no, I can't let you. It's fine," he cut her off. "Just next time, be sure you can cover your meal." The words came out harsher than intended. She flinched, blinking away tears. She rose, clutching her purse. "Thank you," she managed softly. "I really appreciate it." Then she hurried out, seemingly trying to escape embarrassment. Ryan watched her go, a swirl of emotions churning in him. He felt relief that the awkward situation was over, but also guilt for snapping. She might have been truly in hardship. Perhaps he'd been too dismissive. He rationalized that, in a high-end setting, it wasn't normal for a patron to come unprepared. However, a subtle voice in his heart whispered that kindness needn't be so begrudging. That afternoon, the manager, Edmund, asked Ryan about the short payment. Ryan explained briefly, and Edmund waved it off. "Happens sometimes. Thanks for covering," Edmund said. "Just remember not to let it happen often. We're a business, not a charity." Ryan shrugged, relieved it wasn't a bigger issue. By dinner shift, the memory of the woman in the sweater began fading as he dealt with more glamorous customers. The day ended. He pocketed tips, thinking about rent, groceries, and whether he'd come out net positive. The day's minor fiasco receded in his mind. But the next morning, events took an unexpected turn. Ryan arrived at Cordelia's Garden for the lunch shift, noticing a subtle buzz among the staff. People whispered about an upcoming private event. The restaurant was hosting a small press conference for a philanthropic initiative that afternoon. Some local bigwigs and donors would attend. The staff prepared carefully, polishing cutlery, rearranging the bar to serve cocktails, readying the private dining room. Edmund mentioned that a VIP was rumored to appear, someone who might invest in expansions or sponsor a new line of cuisine. Everyone seemed excited. Apparently, the VIP might be evaluating our service and ambience for future collaborations, Edmund said. So be on your A game. Ryan, though curious, focused on his usual tasks. Late morning, deliveries arrived. Fresh blooms for the tables, special ingredients. The kitchen whipped up gourmet canapés for the press conference. The staff wore their best uniforms, shining name tags, ensuring no detail was missed. By midday, reporters and officials trickled in, guided to the private room. Ryan glimpsed a few local politicians, some city charity heads. Among them was a short, bespectacled man whose name Ryan recognized as a prominent real estate magnate. The atmosphere hummed with importance. Then, right before the official event started, a hush descended. A woman walked in, flanked by an assistant, wearing a tasteful blouse and elegant slacks. Something about her face. Ryan froze. It was the same woman from yesterday, the oversized sweater replaced by expensive attire, her hair neatly styled. She carried herself with a quiet confidence, though her expression was still gentle. Ryan nearly dropped the tray he was holding. Was it truly her? The face was unmistakable. The same soft features, the same shape of eyes. But how? Had she won the lottery overnight? Maybe he was mistaken. But the manager seemed to greet her with deference, shaking her hand warmly. The staff parted for her like she was someone special. Ryan's heart hammered. This was more than just a changed outfit. The manager led her into the private room, introducing her to key guests. The staff's hush indicated she was the rumored VIP. Ryan overheard snippets. The woman's name was Anna Mitchell, apparently a major philanthropist and the sole inheritor of a prominent family's estate. She had a background in social welfare, known for surprise visits to potential charity partners, wanting genuine impressions. Some staff members whispered that she was considering funding a new local soup kitchen or maybe offering large-scale philanthropic support to restaurants that participated in community feeding programs. Ryan's mind reeled. This was the woman he had basically dismissed, serving her lukewarm soup, rolling his eyes at her short payment. She was poor one day and wealthy the next. The contradiction baffled him, but he realized she wasn't poor at all. She must have been incognito or simply dressed down for personal reasons. He recalled his harshness and how the soup fiasco played out. Mortification flooded him. If she recognized him, how would she react? More importantly, how would she evaluate Cordelia's Garden if she recalled how poorly he treated her? Ryan's pulse pounded. He felt a bead of sweat forming at his temple. He considered slipping out, feigning sickness, but that was cowardly. He steadied himself. This was a moment of truth. Throughout the press event, Anna Mitchell quietly spoke about her charitable goals, improving community outreach, ensuring the city's restaurants might find ways to reduce food waste by donating to shelters. The media asked questions, snapping photos. Anna responded softly but with clear conviction. The manager stood by, beaming with pride. Ryan hovered in the background, praying she wouldn't glance his way. But halfway through, as the canned ended, she looked around the room. Her eyes landed on Ryan. He saw a flicker of recognition cross her face, shock, then a tempered calm. She gave no public reaction, only a faint, inscrutable smile. Ryan's stomach churned. After the event concluded, the manager invited Anna to tour the main dining area. She graciously agreed, stepping out with her assistant and greeting staff. The manager introduced each server, praising their skill. When they reached Ryan, the manager said, "And this is Ryan, one of our seasoned waiters. He's quite adept at handling high-volume rushes." Anna extended her hand politely. Up close, Ryan saw her face more clearly. Definitely the same woman. His heart hammered. She looked at him with a steady gaze. "Pleased to meet you," she said. Her voice was calm, but in her eyes, he sensed a swirl of thoughts. He managed a tremulous handshake. "A pleasure, Ms. Mitchell," he stammered, cheeks burning. Her assistant glanced between them, sensing tension. The manager beamed obliviously. They moved on. Ryan wanted to sink into the floor. She hadn't outed him or expressed anger publicly. Yet the knowledge that she might condemn his behavior behind closed doors loomed. Indeed, after the tour, the manager discreetly informed staff that Ms. Mitchell would remain for lunch with a few VIPs, sampling the cuisine. She wanted to see how the regular service felt. The manager assigned Ryan to that table, thinking it an honor. Ryan nearly panicked, but refusing would raise questions. Summoning every ounce of composure, he prepared for the worst. When Ms. Mitchell sat down with her small party, 2 local officials and her assistant, Ryan approached with the menus. He forced a pleasant smile. "Good afternoon. May I offer you our specials, or do you prefer the a la carte menu?" Ms. Mitchell returned a polite nod. "The specials, please," she said. The others concurred. He rattled off the daily specials: a grilled salmon with herb butter, a roast chicken with truffle sauce, a risotto of wild mushrooms. They listened politely. Ms. Mitchell studied him for any sign of recognition slip. Then she said, "Thank you. I'll have the roasted chicken and a glass of iced tea." The others placed their orders. He wrote them down, trying not to sweat. Once away from the table, Ryan rushed to the kitchen, ensuring no mistakes. This time, he'd double-check that her food arrived promptly and perfectly. He had the sense that the entire restaurant's future relationship with her philanthropic plan might hinge on her experience. And he recalled how poorly he'd served her the day before, making her wait, letting her soup grow cold, hinting that she was a nuisance. Guilt gnawed at him. He considered an apology, but wasn't sure how or when. He served drinks first. Ms. Mitchell sipped her iced tea calmly, occasionally chatting with her companions. The restaurant's manager hovered, ensuring everything was top-notch. Ryan brought out bread baskets, fresh butter, offering each person his best refined style. Ms. Mitchell said a gentle thank you. He nodded, heart pounding. So far, no confrontation. Next came the entrees. He presented Ms. Mitchell's roasted chicken with care, describing the elements. She thanked him again. Her tone remained civil, betraying no anger. As he retreated, he felt an odd mixture of relief and dread. Perhaps she might wait until after the meal to pass final judgment. Or maybe she'd let it go. The tension ate at him. During the meal, Ryan checked in discreetly. Ms. Mitchell gave polite nods, praising the dish's flavor. The others also complimented the service. By outward appearances, it was a successful lunch. Yet the air crackled with unspoken awareness. She recognized him. He recognized her, neither acknowledging the previous day's fiasco. As they finished, the manager hovered again, hoping to glean her reaction. Ms. Mitchell looked around, remarking that the restaurant had a lovely ambience, well-trained staff, and good menu variety. The manager beamed. "We pride ourselves on consistent excellence," he said. Ms. Mitchell offered a small, thoughtful smile. Yes, consistency is key. Her eyes flicked to Ryan momentarily before returning to the manager. After a short, concluding chat, Ms. Mitchell rose to leave. The manager offered her a comped meal, which she politely declined, saying she preferred to pay normally. The assistant handled the transaction, tipping generously. Ms. Mitchell turned to the manager. Thank you for hosting us. I'll be in touch regarding potential community outreach collaborations. Then, her gaze shifted to Ryan. Mr. Ryan, could I have a moment if you're free? The manager, puzzled, nodded. Of course, he said. Ryan swallowed hard, stepping aside to a quiet corner with Ms. Mitchell. She faced him, eyes kind yet firm. He braced for a scolding. Instead, she spoke softly. Yesterday, you served me, or rather, you eventually did, she said, letting the words hang. He flushed. I'm sorry, he whispered, voice tight. I was overwhelmed, but that's no excuse. I judged you. I assumed you wouldn't tip. I gave you subpar treatment. That was wrong, and I regret it. She studied him, expression unreadable. I realize your job can be stressful, but it was clear you saw me as unimportant, a bother, perhaps because of how I looked. He nodded, cheeks burning. Yes, he admitted. I made assumptions. And, about the short payment, I shouldn't have humiliated you. You paid most of it, I covered a quarter, but I was rude. He exhaled shakily. I'm really sorry. She nodded, letting silence linger. Then she said, one reason I occasionally dress down and visit places unannounced is to gauge genuine attitudes. It's a habit I developed. I've encountered all sorts of responses. Some staff remain gracious no matter how the patron appears. Others treat you differently if they suspect you can't pay or won't tip well. Your reaction was hurtful, yes, but also honest. It shows me there's a gap in how we treat people who appear poor. Ryan's stomach twisted. I see. I feel terrible, he said. I wish I could redo that moment. Ms. Mitchell shook her head gently. Regret is fine, but hopefully you learn from it. He expected condemnation, but her tone was more sorrowful than angry. I can't claim I'm perfect, she added. Yet I want you to reflect on how many people come here, maybe having saved up for a special meal, or how many might appear unassuming, but are your best customers in disguise. Or, more simply, how we should treat everyone with decency. She sighed. Anyway, I'm not here to punish you. But I want you to remember that day if you ever see someone who looks out of place. The goal of hospitality is to make them feel welcome. Yes? Ryan nodded fervently. Yes, absolutely. I promise I'll do better. She gave a small, warm smile, though sadness tinged her eyes. Good. In the grand scheme, I'm not personally harmed. But what about the countless folks who truly can't pay? They get scorn without recourse. That's the real tragedy. Then she gently said goodbye, leaving him standing there, heart pounding with a mixture of shame and relief. She walked out with her assistant, the manager still starry-eyed about a potential partnership, having no idea of the conversation's weight. In the days that followed, the staff buzzed about the possibility of Ms. Mitchell's philanthropic support. Meanwhile, Ryan wrestled with guilt. He replayed her words, realizing how superficial his assumptions had been. The tension had broken with that quiet conversation, but the moral weighed heavily. A few weeks later, Ms. Mitchell indeed announced a new program partnering with Cordelia's Garden to donate leftover food nightly to local shelters, with the restaurant staff volunteering monthly. Ryan volunteered quickly, hoping to do tangible good. When the donation program launched, Ms. Mitchell visited the restaurant's kitchen to see how surplus food was packaged. Ryan assisted, carefully sealing items. She offered him a cordial nod, and they worked side by side, labeling containers for transport. At one point, she softly commented, "This is a good start. I appreciate your involvement." Ryan mustered a grateful smile. "I want to help truly." She squeezed his shoulder lightly. "I can see that." Their conversation was brief but meaningful. A month later, Ms. Mitchell orchestrated a community dinner event in Cordelia's Garden, inviting both well-off donors and homeless individuals from local shelters to dine as equals. That night, the staff was instructed to serve everyone with the same courtesy. Ryan felt nerves swirling. He recognized that those in ragged clothes might show up. Reminiscent of the day, he belittled Ms. Mitchell. But now he approached them with genuine warmth, seating them, offering bread, recommending dishes, ensuring their comfort. He found himself actually enjoying the dialogues. He heard stories of perseverance and heartbreak, realized how each person had a name, a story, a dream. By evening's end, Ms. Mitchell stood to address the group, praising the staff's hospitality. She singled out Ryan as someone who'd grown in empathy, acknowledging him for his improved attitude. He felt his cheeks flush, but also a swell of pride. Applause filled the dining room. As the event wound down, Ms. Mitchell approached him with a gentle smile. "Well done," she said quietly. "You've shown me, and perhaps others, that mistakes can lead to change if we own them." Ryan exhaled, tears glinting in his eyes. "Thank you for giving me the chance. I'll never forget your lesson." Later that night, after the guest departed, the staff cleaned up. The manager patted Ryan on the back, praising his performance. Ryan only nodded, mind drifting to the next morning, how he'd volunteer at a shelter to serve breakfast. He realized that once he might have deemed that a waste of personal time, but now he craved a deeper connection, wanting to keep his heart open. In the weeks that followed, word spread about Ms. Mitchell's philanthropic dinners, praising Cordelia's Garden. The restaurant's reputation soared. People admired how the staff, especially Ryan, treated each patron equally. Rumor having it that a major investor once arrived in simple attire and was greeted with courtesy. Ryan recognized how small acts of kindness could resonate widely, fueling a culture shift. Meanwhile, Ms. Mitchell occasionally dropped by, dressed in either fine clothes or plain sweaters, sometimes unannounced. Each time, Ryan greeted her with genuine respect, ensuring she felt welcome no matter the outfit. She'd smile knowingly, neither flaunting her wealth nor hiding it. She was simply herself, reminding the world that appearances can be deceiving. Ryan's personal life also improved. He felt a renewed sense of purpose. He even overcame friction with some coworkers, encouraging them to treat each diner with that same open-minded courtesy. Some teased him, calling him the conscience of the floor, but they also followed suit. The manager, seeing fewer complaints and an uptick in positive reviews, was pleased, oblivious to how it all traced back to that single near-catastrophic moment with Ms. Mitchell. Eventually, Ms. Mitchell formalized a large donation, partially funding a new community center. During the groundbreaking ceremony, she invited Cordelia's Garden staff to cater. Ryan served hors d'oeuvres, glancing occasionally at Ms. Mitchell, who wore a simple summer dress. She caught his eye once, nodded with warmth. The memory of how he'd once made her wait for cold soup and scolded her for being short on payment contrasted sharply with the present. In that moment, he realized the full weight of how an initially cruel act could pivot into a grand positive transformation if the right steps of remorse, humility, and apology followed. That day, Ms. Mitchell took Ryan aside, leading him to a quiet corner of the center's grounds. "The community center will have a small cafe, open to everyone," she explained. "We'd love local restaurant staff to do occasional workshops, teaching cooking basics, or serving unemployed folks who want to build culinary skills. Would you like to be involved?" Ryan's eyes lit up. "Absolutely," he said. "I'd be honored." She smiled. "I've heard from your manager you're quite skilled in the kitchen, not just as a server. Maybe this is your chance to guide others." At that, tears pricked Ryan's eyes. He recalled his dream of opening a restaurant someday. Now, he had a chance to mentor or share knowledge with those lacking opportunities. I can't thank you enough," he murmured. Ms. Mitchell patted his arm. "No, Ryan, thank you. You chose to change. That's what matters." That night, exhausted but elated, Ryan reflected on how profoundly a single incident had redirected his life. If Ms. Mitchell had never come in, disguised, on that random Thursday, he might have continued gliding along with mild arrogance, never discovering how crucial it was to treat everyone with dignity. He saw that even small gestures, a warm greeting, timely service, empathy in awkward money situations, could define whether someone felt respected or shunned. The knowledge settled into his bones, shifting his worldview. Months later, Ms. Mitchell's philanthropic efforts with Cordelia's Garden and other local businesses blossomed. She remained a quiet figure, avoiding big self-promotion. The restaurant gained a reputation as a place that balanced high-end quality with a surprising sense of community outreach. Media outlets occasionally interviewed Ryan about the shift. He never revealed every detail of that humiliating day, but alluded to a humbling encounter that taught me the value of sincere hospitality. Through Ms. Mitchell's network, Ryan met chefs involved in charitable cooking programs, forging new friendships. He collaborated in events that served gourmet meals to impoverished families. Each time, he recalled the memory of Ms. Mitchell sitting alone with her cold soup. It pushed him to ensure no guest in his orbit ever felt so overlooked again, whether in a fancy dining room or a makeshift soup kitchen. Finally, after nearly a year, Ms. Mitchell invited Ryan to a small dinner at her estate, an intimate gathering of 10 people, including various philanthropic partners. Ryan arrived, marveling at the modesty of the exterior, though he soon realized the property extended into lush gardens. They dined outdoors under a vine-laced pergola. The conversation was warm, discussing ongoing projects. Sometime after dessert, Ms. Mitchell addressed Ryan with a fond grin. "I've watched your journey this past year. You carry yourself differently now, less guarded, more compassionate. I'm grateful for that." He nodded, voice thick with emotion. "I owe it to you. You gave me a second chance. That day I was so condescending. You had every right to expose me or be angry." She chuckled softly. "I won't deny I felt hurt, but my father always taught me that scolding a person only does so much. Guiding them forward does more. I'm proud of how you seized the moment. Maybe we can all learn to see the humanity behind every face." Her words rang with finality, as if a circle had closed. Before he left, she quietly pressed a small envelope into his hand. "A token of thanks," she said. "Don't decline. It's not a check. I know you'd prefer to earn your own way. This is just an invitation." When he peeked inside later, he found a letter referencing a scholarship for a professional culinary institute, partly funded by Ms. Mitchell's foundation, ensuring Ryan could hone his craft. The letter stated that if accepted, the institute would let him work part-time, so he wouldn't lose his livelihood. Ryan felt tears threaten to spill. This was more than generosity. It was a tangible path toward his dream. He texted Ms. Mitchell a heartfelt thank you that same evening, promising to pay it forward. In the months and years that followed, Ryan juggled his duties at Cordelia's Garden with culinary studies, eventually graduating near the top of his class. Ms. Mitchell came to his final presentation, sampling his creative dishes that combined fine dining flair with a compassionate sense of pricing for broader accessibility. He joked that his future restaurant would always offer a soup of the day discount, so no one felt locked out. She beamed proudly. On the day Ryan launched his own modest bistro, a small place named Open Arms Kitchen, Ms. Mitchell attended the opening as a guest of honor. The concept was simple: top-quality meals at fair prices, with a daily pay-what-you-can soup auction. Staff training emphasized unwavering respect for every diner. Ryan told the local paper, "I learned the hard way that you never know who walks through your door. It might be someone with hidden wealth or no wealth at all, but everyone deserves dignity." Ms. Mitchell gave the inaugural toast, praising Ryan's evolution from a waiter who once dismissed her to a chef owner determined to embrace all. In the end, Open Arms Kitchen thrived. Patrons from all walks of life felt welcome, some well-off, others scraping by, a few using the pay-what-you-can soup daily. The atmosphere crackled with warmth. And though Ryan's journey started in shame, ignoring a seemingly poor customer, he transformed that mistake into a guiding principle of compassion. The moral was clear: appearances can be deceptive, and a single act of prejudice can cost not only a customer, but also an opportunity for genuine human connection. Through humility, an apology, and persistent effort, he turned that misstep into a life mission. Ms. Mitchell became a lifelong mentor and friend, occasionally dropping by unannounced in simple clothes, ordering the soup of the day. Ryan always served her with a grateful smile, remembering how her quiet revelation changed his life, ensuring that he never again ignored someone based on how they looked, but rather embraced them for who they might be or become beneath the surface.